Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had to relive it all part 2. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story crayonying from Wattpad. So let's start the video. Another half an hour, or even another day. That crazy nerd always found a way to crawl out of the holes he dug for himself. During this wait, Katsuki had thought about his losses to Deku ever since the day that the acceptance letters arrived. The entrance exam, the mock battle training, the obstacle race. After all of those losses, Katsuki had been overwhelmed by fury and denial. Heck, only an hour ago, he was still furious about the obstacle race. But waiting here, staring at the crack in the ground and hearing the wind whistle in the hallway, it occurred to him that maybe, just maybe, the Deku who won over him wasn't someone who gained extraordinary strength right before the entrance exam. Maybe the Deku who won over him had been there all along, and the image of the crying follower, the image of a useless Deku, was merely what Katsuki wanted himself to see. The thought was infuriating. The blonde boy was suddenly pulled back to reality when the bored chatter of the audience turned into cheers of excitement. He stood up from his leaning position and looked across the field. "Look who's back." Mick's voice boomed from the speakers. "Thank you, everybody, for waiting patiently for our finalist. Now, without further ado, may the contestants for the final round of the first-year stage of the U8 Sports Festival enter the arena." Katsuki took his hands out of his pockets and stepped out onto the field, squinting slightly when bright sunlight replaced the shadows of the hallway. From across the field, the boy with green hair strode towards the elevated battle arena. His wide emerald eyes showed no fear, and Katsuki accepted that they will never be the same panicked eyes of their childhood ever again. "Sorry for the wait," Deku said, his gaze steady. "Yeah." The little boy with teary eyes and trembling fists that followed Katsuki around was long gone. "Listen, Deku, don't you dare hold back," Katsuki growled. "I don't really have a choice." Deku looked at the stadium around them. "I need to give everyone watching someone to trust in the future." "Yeah, sure, they'll trust in a liar," Katsuki spat. Deku's unwavering gaze suddenly faltered. Contestants ready? 3, 2, 1, start." Not wasting a second, Katsuki sprinted full speed towards Deku with his arm pulled back, a charge building up. Deku lowered his stance and activated his quirk. Raw power visibly surged through him, lighting up his veins and sending green electricity crackling through the air. When Katsuki neared him, he couldn't help but shudder at the sudden pressure change in the atmosphere. Not just because of the pure power surrounding Deku, but also because of the boy's unwavering and calculating gaze. Instantly, Katsuki knew that Deku saw through his move. Heck, the nerd probably already predicted his next series of moves. Katsuki gritted his teeth. Change of plans. The explosion he had built up in his right hand suddenly changed direction, and instead of shooting directly at Deku as he planned, his attack blasted at the ground, sending bits of shattered concrete flying and forcing Deku to leap back in alarm. That tiny bit of disorientation was all Katsuki needed. When Katsuki blasted at the ground, the force propelled him upward as well, and with a couple more directional explosions, he was spinning toward Deku like a tornado and missile combined. Howitzer impact. The move was hasty with little momentum, so it didn't achieve its full potential, but it was still powerful enough to send shockwaves throughout the stadium and break the ground underneath Deku. Katsuki hit the ground on his side with a thump, the muscles in his forearms burning from the explosion, but he wasn't done. He scrambled to his feet and held his palms close together, his fingers tense. The entire arena was submerged in smoke and debris from his explosion. Quick footsteps. A flicker of green. Instinctually, Katsuki threw his palms towards his right, his body acting before his eyes even registered Deku. But instead of his usual explosion, a blinding light filled the space between his hands and his opponent. Deku flinched with a gasp of surprise, and Katsuki took the opportunity to send a punch across Deku's face, and Deku barely managed to block the blow with his arms. But Katsuki wasn't done. He attacked with explosion after explosion in rapid succession, while Deku dodged and redirected but never got the chance to counter. "Come on!" Katsuki screamed, "I told you not to hold back." "I will not." Deku's gaze became ablaze with anger, and the green lightning around him flashed as if responding to his emotions. Deku's moves suddenly became faster, and Katsuki's eyes widened as the green-haired boy shot forward, closed the distance, and grabbed Katsuki's arm mid-explosion. Yanking the blonde boy forward by his arm, Deku threw a powerful punch straight at Katsuki's face. Katsuki twisted just in time to avoid the impact, but Deku's punch seemed to rip through the space around them, and before Katsuki registered what happened, he felt an air blast collide with him, knocking the breath out of his lungs and tossing him across the arena like a doll. The ground smashed into him, and pain racked his body. Katsuki wheezed and coughed, his chest heaving and his arms trembling as he pushed himself back onto his feet. He still wasn't done. Deku was standing further away. Katsuki noticed the strain in his green eyes, the pain in his expression. The pain. This wasn't the first time Katsuki had noticed that pain. A pain that seemed out of place on Deku's face, and it annoyed the hell out of Katsuki. "Stop it," Katsuki seethed. Deku looked at him, confused. "Stop what? My headache." Katsuki knew damn well that the pain in Deku's expression wasn't just because of a stupid headache. It went beyond the sports festival, and it occurred to Katsuki that Deku didn't actually care about what happened in this arena, but about something greater. As if was greater. "Stop acting like this is all some kind of joke to you," Katsuki growled. "You're always hiding things, planning things, believing that you're somehow superior or holy or always acting like some goddamn chosen one." Deku scowled. "Kaken, I don't know why you thought that, but I will never treat this like a joke. I want to win just as much as you do, and if there's one person I will never underestimate, it's you." They didn't need to say anything more. The two boys knew that whatever conflict they had between them, words were useless. They will settle this here and now, in the arena. Izuku couldn't hold back his anger anymore. Bakugo seemed to think that he didn't care about this match, but the truth was that he cared too much, to the point that it was excruciating. The memories were excruciating. Bakugo was a childhood friend. A friend who always smacked away Izuku's helping hand. A friend who, even while vanishing through a murky black portal in the hands of a villain, choked out, "Don't come, Deku." But also a friend who threw himself in front of Izuku and blocked a fatal blow. Izuku could still remember that moment, bright red tendrils stabbing out from Bakugo's body, blood dripping. By the end of his last life, Izuku and Bakugo were able to become comrades, even friends in some way. But Izuku feared that their relationship will never be like that again. Not after the time travel. Not with the unbreakable barrier of 2 extra years between them. Black Whip sprung into existence and Izuku leaped high into the air, leaving a streak of green lightning behind him. Bakugo looked up, his red eyes gleaming and his palms bright. Izuku's strengthened kick met Bakugo's explosion, the power of both attacks many times greater than before. The two boys fought, green lightning and black tendrils weaving and colliding with explosions that became more precise and vicious by the second. Izuku's movements were fueled by experience and raw strength, but Bakugo's stronger build and frightening reflexes made it hard for Izuku to land a winning blow. Snatching up pieces of broken concrete from the ground with Black Whip, Izuku threw them at Bakugo, who lifted his palms and blew apart the projectiles instantly. But the attack distracted Bakugo from the extra tendril aimed at his legs. Black Whip tripped Bakugo and he landed on his chest. Before he got up completely, Izuku's strong kick to his shoulders smashed him to the ground again. Bakugo tried to push himself up again, but his arms, clearly strained from overusing his quirk, trembled so violently they struggled to support his weight. But Izuku knew that Bakugo would never give up. Bakugo yelled and shoved himself up. With explosive speed he grabbed onto Izuku's waist, knocking him backward. His palms made contact with Izuku's back, and the next instant Izuku felt the explosion nearly tear apart his body. The deafening boom and the ringing that followed, combined with his pre-existing headache, sent waves of pain through his head. Bakugo knelt above Izuku, his right foot pinning Izuku's arm down. Bakugo pulled back a trembling arm and sent an explosion at Izuku's face. Izuku's free hand shot up to protect himself, but it was barely enough. Bakugo raised his arm for another attack, but Black Whip suddenly shot up and wrapped around his arm. With a yelp, Bakugo was thrown off. Izuku pushed himself up, but his body was nearing its limit. Although his body's limit never really stopped him from fighting, he wasn't planning to destroy his body, especially in a fight with Bakugo. Harming his own body had caused Bakugo to get kidnapped by villains in Izuku's last life, and the idea of reliving that moment pained Izuku. So Izuku lowered his stance again, and Black Whip wrapped around his right arm firmly like armor. Bakugo had seen this move in Izuku's fight against Todoroki, and he knew what was coming, so he took a deep breath and the air sizzled and popped around his palms. Then air blast met explosion, and the stadium shook. Class 1A had all stood up from their seats by then. Who won? Uraraka stretched her neck to get a clearer look at the arena. I don't know. There's too much smoke, Kirishima replied. Then gradually, the smoke dissipated, and the stadium gasped at the sight, then cheered. Izuku stood, fist trembling, his black WHP-like power still wrapped around his arm. Bakugo was on his side, struggling to get up. Bakugo is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. The audience erupted into thunderous cheering, whistling, and clapping. The winner of the first-year sports festival is Midoriya Izuku. Izuku couldn't help the smile on his face. How many times in his childhood had he dreamed of winning the UA Sports Festival? He could hear his heartbeat despite the deafening applause, and he shivered in excitement. Then he raised a fist in the air. Almost impossibly, the applause grew even louder. The symbolic pose of a standing hero, the pillar of peace. I'm here, Izuku breathed. Bakugo watched on the side as Midoriya held his fist up high, recognizing the pose. Suddenly, they were kids again, opening up their chip bags to find an All Might collectible card, with Midoriya excitedly imitating the hero's posture from the image and Bakugo laughing and saying that Deku could never, ever, be a hero like All Might. Bakugo stood up, but even though he was now standing, he had never felt as lowly. All he felt was defeat. Everybody's attention was on Midoriya Izuku, not Bakugo Katsuki. Katsuki thought to himself. Deku was already, the hero he wanted to be. After the arena was cleared, the first-year students were instructed to leave the audience stands and gather on the field. As the students organized themselves into their assigned standing orders, Izuku followed a school robot to a room underneath the field. When he arrived, Tokoyami and Bakugo were already there. Izuku avoided making eye contact with Bakugo, and even though he wasn't watching, he knew that Bakugo was doing the same. Izuku had no idea how to face him at that moment. Likely noticing the tense atmosphere and the fact that Izuku and Bakugo weren't acknowledging each other, Tokoyami cleared his throat and made his way over to Izuku. Congratulations, Tokoyami gave a slight nod. Thanks, you too, Izuku smiled, couldn't have done it without you in that cavalry battle. The room returned to silence, the only sound being the muffled noise of the sports festival above. Izuku glanced around and realized that Iida wasn't there, even though he technically placed third as well. He must have already received the call about his brother, Ingenium. Then, a robot instructed the 3 top competitors to stand on the 3 large, adjacent circles, and with a rumble, the ceiling opened up. The light blinded Izuku, and he heard fireworks go off around the stadium. Confetti flew around and into his face, and the platform rose above the stadium ground. Izuku was impressed by the scene. Crowds were cheering, professional photographers were snapping photos of the 3 top contestants, and, for the first time, Izuku noticed the large TV cameras. By the time Izuku's first-place platform whirred to a stop, raising him higher than everyone else on the field, the audience's attention was suddenly directed to the upper level of the stadium. Both students and spectators went wild as the number 1 hero, All Might, leapt down and landed with a pose. Now, Midnight announced, All Might would be presenting the awards. All Might placed the 3rd-place medal around Tokoyami's neck and gave him a hug with a pat on the back. Then, the hero awarded Bakugo, and for the first time since the final round, Izuku studied the blonde boy. The corners of Bakugo's mouth were drawn, his fists were clenched, and his expression was of anger but not quite the disbelief that he used to show. He wasn't looking at Izuku, which made Izuku think that Bakugo's anger wasn't directed at him. But at least he wasn't yelling and screaming with a muzzle or struggling against chains. Finally, All Might came to the first-place platform and raised the golden medal. Izuku dipped his head as the hero lowered the medal around the boy's neck. Izuku looked up again, and with proud smiles, there seemed to be a wordless exchange between mentor and student. All Might gave Izuku a hug with the same pat on the back as he gave Tokoyami and Bakugo, but the weight of it was different. "Thank you, All Might." Izuku dipped his head again. "You did it," the hero said. The walk back to the classroom was filled with a chorus of congratulations, but mostly Uraraka's excited squeals. "I thought you were gonna lose," when Bakugo was going like, boom, and pow. She made another series of explosion sounds, but then you and your black whip move, and then that final blow. What she's trying to say is that you did great, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu smiled. Everyone was very excited. "Congrats," Todoroki said softly. "Yeah, way to go, man." Kirishima hurried to Izuku with a grin and gave him an encouraging pat on the back, then quickly returned to Bakugo's side and threw an arm over the grumpy boy's shoulder. Kaminari and Shiro rushed to their side. On the other side of the hallway, Tokoyami, who preferred to be alone most of the time, was also talking to a couple of other classmates, smiling at their encouragements. Izuku glanced around with a smile. The tension that surrounded 1A since the USJ attack had faded into motivation. "Oh right, Deku," Uraraka suddenly said with a serious tone. "Yeah. Iida came to me right before the final round and said that he needed to leave because his brother got attacked by a villain," Uraraka said. "Sorry, should have told you this earlier." "Really?" Izuku acted surprised. "So why he wasn't at the awards ceremony, I see. Thanks for telling me. I hope his brother's okay." "I hope so too," she said. After the class returned to the classroom, Aizawa stood at the podium and announced all the logistics stuff. "You'll have the next 2 days of school off to recuperate. Get some rest. When we return we will be talking about recruitment." Aizawa dismissed the class, then the students gathered their things and trickled out. Leaving campus, Izuku and Uraraka traveled in the late afternoon light toward the station. Other UA students called out congratulations to Izuku, and he responded with grateful smiles. "I'll see you when we get back," Uraraka said as they parted ways. "Congrats." "Thanks, I'll see you soon," Izuku smiled back, then made his way back home. "I'm back," Izuku called when he opened the apartment door, but his mother was waiting for him. "Izuku, my baby." His mom pulled him into a tight hug, her face wet with tears. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," Izuku hugged back. "I couldn't do this without you." His mom pulled back, a smile so wide Izuku worried it would break her face. "Izuku, my boy, all of this was because of your own hard work." Her smile faltered for a moment. "I'm sorry that support is all that I can give you. Your friends, especially those who come from hero families, I will never be able to provide the amount of resources that they have, but despite all that, despite not even having a quirk for such a long time, you won, son, you won." Tears threatened to flow from Izuku's eyes, and he grabbed his mother's shaky hands. "Mom, no matter what you think, your support is what keeps me going. I love you." His mom beamed. "Oh, I'm so proud of you. My son, winner of the UA Sports Festival. I can't believe it. Come, I prepared some food for you. Do you want to watch the sports festival replay? I recorded it in HD. I thought you passed out multiple times while watching. You really want to relive that?" "How did you know I passed out?" "Guessed." "Well, you're right, I think it was 7-ish times. Maybe 8, I forgot to count. So I guess we'll save the sports festival recording for later." Izuku laughed. "Agreed." His mother sighed. "I was worried out of my mind, Izuku. Especially seeing your quirk. You know, I was so happy that you finally awakened it, but I still feel like there's so much I don't know about it. About you. Trust me, Mom, you're probably the person who knows me best. You knew that I always wanted to be a hero." She grinned, "And not just any hero, a hero like All Might, who says, 'I'm here,' and brings a smile to everyone's face. You know me. And I hope it stays that way," she said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Izuku, when you become a hero, promise me you won't change, that you would always smile. And promise me you'll try your best to stay safe." "I promise." The Bakugo household's doorbell chimed. "Katsuki." Get the door. Shut up, old hag. Katsuki rose from the couch and opened the front door. The sight made him scowl. What the hell are you doing here? Deku lifted up a plastic bag and pulled out a box of oranges. I'm heading to the grocery store and my mom wanted me to give you guys this since I was passing by. To congratulate you for doing so well at the sports festival. Katsuki nearly spat in his face. Deku was the last person he wanted congratulations from. You? Katsuki was suddenly interrupted by his mother shoving him away from the door. Izuku. Welcome. Please come in. Katsuki's mom smiled at Izuku but immediately expressions when she turned to her son. Katsuki, Izuku barely comes over anymore. Quit being rude, you brat. It's okay, Mrs. Bakugo. Izuku laughed awkwardly then handed her the oranges. Here, a gift from my mother. That's really sweet of Inko, Katsuki's mom said. You sure you don't want to come in? I'm fine. Though I was wondering, Kaken, Izuku said stiffly to Katsuki, do you want to come with me to the grocery store? We can talk about the sports festival and school and stuff. Katsuki's eyes widened. His instincts wanted to roar at Deku to get lost, and that there was no way he was going to talk to this stupid nerd, but he held the insults back. Deku probably didn't want to talk to Katsuki either, but the fact that Deku requested to, it would be idiotic for Katsuki to not hear him out. Plus, Katsuki was tired of getting yelled at by his mom. Fine. We'll talk, Katsuki hissed, then put on his shoes and left the house with Deku. It was excruciatingly weird. Katsuki and Deku had grown apart a long time ago, and the way they were traveling side by side to the grocery store was unfamiliar and bizarre. It was still a weekday, so the sidewalks were empty and the roads were calm. The sky was clear, the sun was bright, and a soft wind carried around the sounds of chirping birds and a passing aircraft. Katsuki glanced at the boy next to him, and Deku's expression was so painfully awkward that Katsuki had to hold back a punch. Was the one who wanted to talk, for goodness sake. Not pushing Deku, Katsuki waited patiently as they walked in silence. Finally, Deku seemed to have made up his mind. I meant to win, you know, Deku said, but I never underestimated you. You have always been my image of success, so I never looked down upon you. I was always looking up. Katsuki forced down his anger and considered Deku's words. He wanted to scream and prove Deku wrong, to prove that Deku was in fact forgetting that Katsuki was better, but the more Katsuki thought about it, the more he realized that Deku wasn't lying. Since they were children, Deku always treated Katsuki with wonder and awe. But that didn't mean that Deku was SBMSSV. When it came to fighting, Deku's defiant gaze had always been there, even though Katsuki had tried to ignore it. During their sports festival match, it was there too. Unlike people such as that annoying half-and-half, Deku doesn't hold back, considering the fact that he regularly demolishes his body during fights. The memory of Katsuki's fight with Pancake Face resurfaced. Katsuki clicked his tongue. Fine, he admitted that Deku won this time. But Katsuki would never give Deku the pleasure of hearing him admit that out loud. Deku's surprised stare bore holes in Katsuki's face, making him shift uncomfortably. What? Katsuki snapped, his usual annoyance flaring again. Deku let out a small, nervous laugh. You're not angry at me anymore. That won't be true if you don't shut up immediately. The green-haired boy's expression seemed to show relief. I guess we're good on being rivals now. I told you to shut up. After a couple more steps of silence, Katsuki muttered, almost inaudibly, I'll win though. We're all aiming to be the #1 hero, Deku replied with a shaky smirk. I said I'll win. Katsuki barked. So, we're at the grocery store. Toretti. People are looking at you. Don't you shush me, you demon nerd. Shoo, Deku. Deku escaped into the grocery store as the automatic doors sluggishly widened. Katsuki followed angrily, but as he stepped into the store, a bottle of hot sauce that he just ran out of this morning caught his eye, making him stop in his tracks. He huffed in annoyance and grabbed the hot sauce, a grin spreading across his face. Why are you smiling? Deku's terrified eyes poked out from behind a shelf. Go get your stupid groceries, you demon nerd. Katsuki's smile vanished and his scowl returned. I just really like this hot sauce. Midoriya Izuku. Hey, it's the winner of the UEH Sports Festival. I saw that kid on TV. Great job. And after that it got even worse because someone started clapping and everyone else in the train car followed, leaving Izuku standing awkwardly in the middle. The ride to school seemed to take an eternity, but finally, Izuku made it to UA, still stiff from the encounters. When Izuku made it to the 1A classroom and sat down, Mineta leaned forward in his seat with wide eyes and a curious grin. How was your post-festival experience, number 1? Izuku shook his head, petrifying. I'd expect that, Kaminari laughed. Even some of us who got eliminated early got recognized. You're basically a celebrity now. Morning, everyone. Aizawa stepped into the classroom and everyone returned to their seats. Today, we'll be picking hero names. This is related to the hero drafting program, where you'll be interning with pro heroes for a week. Based on your performance in the sports festival, some of you got offers from agencies. The teacher turned on the screen. Here are the total offers 1A received. Izuku gasped. He had the highest amount of offers, with well over 3,000. Bakugo's offers were in the high 2,000 range. Todoroki, despite only making it to the quarterfinals, had the third highest of around 1,000, much higher than Tokoyami and Iida, who were the actual third-place winners. Whoa! Look at you! Mineta leaned forward and screeched in Izuku's ear. Izuku watched as Bakugo tensed, but thankfully, there was no murderous intent. Then, midnight came into the classroom and 1A started choosing their hero names. From Ajui's name of Fropeach to Bakugo's rejected name of Explosion Murder King, everyone's choices were exactly as Izuku expected, which gave him a warm sense of familiarity. However, that familiarity soon vanished as he received his offer list. It was multiple pages long, with the names of agencies sprawled across the sheets of paper. Geez, that's a lot. Kaminari peeked over Izuku's shoulder. Do you have an agency in mind? Well, there was one, but, Izuku muttered as he skipped to the agencies that started with G. His eyebrows scrunched together when he realized that Gran Torino's agency wasn't on the list. I didn't get an offer from there. Hey, that's okay. Uraraka comforted, you had thousands of offers. I'm sure you'll find one that you like. But now that I don't know where to go, how should I even start? Izuku flipped to a random page and sighed. Dude, you're overthinking this, Kaminari said. Just pick an agency with a hero that you like and go for it. I guess, Izuku said as he skimmed over the page. But right when he was about to return to the front, something caught his eye. Wait, this can't be, what is it? Uraraka asked curiously. Memories resurfaced, and ideas that only briefly crossed his mind since he time-traveled. Ideas that seemed so far-fetched that Izuku had dismissed them immediately, suddenly felt as if they were in reach. He received an offer from the Nighteye agency. Young Midoriya, I need to talk to you. Muscular All Might came to Izuku in the hallway the next day during lunch. Next to Izuku, Uraraka waved and went into the cafeteria with Ajui. Well, I'll see you later then, Deku. What do you want to talk to me about, All Might? Izuku asked as he followed his teacher to the office. It's about the hero agency internships. Izuku's mood dropped. He was expecting this moment to come. When the two made it to the empty meeting room, All Might sat down and returned to his skinny form. Young Midoriya, out of all of the offers that you got, why did you have to choose Sir Nighteye? I don't really see why not. He can improve my prediction and fighting skills. All Might leaned back into his seat, trying to find the right words to say. I'm sure you know from your last life that Nighteye and I aren't exactly on good terms, especially after I told him that I chose you as my successor, instead of Togata. I know. All Might sighed and looked down. I don't know why Nighteye wants you to study at his agency. Perhaps he wants to prove me wrong about my choice. I'm just here to warn you, young Midoriya. Simply put, Sir Nighteye hates me right now, so you need to think twice about going there for the internship. It's okay, All Might. Izuku shook his head and smiled. In my last life, he did want to test my worthiness, but it wasn't because he hated you. And for this internship week, he didn't give me an offer. So if he actually wanted to prove you wrong, trust me, my previous performance at the sports festival would have made me look a lot worse. Really? But why did Nighteye offer you an internship this time? To my knowledge, he rarely does student internships. That's what I'm going to find out. The hero nodded, then asked, who did you do your internship with last time? Then, Gran Torino. Are you for real? Gran Torino. Have fun at Sir Nighteye's. It was the morning of the first day of internship week, and the warm breeze carried around the sounds of cars and pedestrians. Izuku held his hero costume case in front of the office building-like agency. He took a deep breath, then stepped through the doors. He wasn't sure why Sir Nighteye offered him to intern here, but the thought of making the eccentric hero laugh, an unspoken requirement to gain Sir's favor, absolutely terrified Izuku. But what terrified him more was the fact that he would be facing someone whose death he could influence. Hey there. The young woman with dark blue hair, light blue skin, and cheerful yellow eyes, Bubble Girl, called to Izuku as he walked into the building. Good morning. Izuku dipped his head with a smile. He hadn't seen Sir Nighteye's sidekick in a very long time. You must be the new intern, Midoriya Izuku. Sir's waiting in his office. Let me take you there. He followed her to the hero's work office and waited nervously as she knocked on the door. Come in, Sir's muffled but stern voice said. Izuku gulped. Bubble Girl opened the door, and Sir Nighteye came into view. There he was in his plain, light gray suit, with his red dotted tie and golden-rimmed glasses, sitting behind an office desk. His cold glare felt like a sword that seemed to slice Izuku into pieces. Sir Izuku's voice was an octave higher than he wanted it to be. He glanced sideways and froze as he saw the tickle torture machine backed up against the wall. Bubble Girl must have seen it too, because she quickly dismissed herself, closed the door, and left a frozen Izuku by himself in the hero's office. Midoriya Izuku, Sir Nighteye's stone-hard voice sliced through the air. We finally meet. You wanted to see me? Izuku asked, pulling his attention away from the tickle torture machine and his panicked search for a joke. Couldn't be funny on command, so he just gave up. Well, you won the sports festival. I feel like it's more than that, Izuku said in the most respectful voice he could muster. Then why did you, with so many offers, choose the inconspicuous Nighteye agency? You were the #1 hero's sidekick. The hero raised an eyebrow. I feel like it's more than that. Silence fell upon the room for a while, and both of them knew that their choice to meet each other went beyond the internship's intended purpose. Izuku sighed. I do have stuff I need to tell you, sir. But before I do, may I know why you offered me an internship? Fine. Sir Nighteye stood up from his seat and walked towards Izuku. You see, when All Might told me that you would be his successor, I didn't approve of his choice. After the sports festival, I wanted to meet you and see for myself. Izuku tried to piece everything together. It seemed like Nighteye did in fact want to test Izuku's worthiness just like last time, but something that Izuku did during the sports festival prompted Nighteye to take the extra step of offering an internship. My sports festival performance. Did you see it in a good way or bad way? Izuku asked. That's too many questions with no humor. I'm afraid I will not be answering. Wait, what? Right now, let's forget our whatever motives. Sir Nighteye grabbed Izuku by the shoulders and seemed to stare into his soul. I'm going to see if you're a worthy successor, and you're going to prove to me that you are. How am I going to do that? Izuku knew exactly how he was going to do that. You're going to take this away from me. The hero reached into his pocket and pulled out a stamp. If that's what it takes, Izuku set down his hero costume case near the wall and walked towards the center of the office. Sir Nighteye stood a couple of feet away, still holding the stamp. I'm ready, Izuku said, and the green blaze of his quirk burst into life. But before the fight even started, it came to an end. Sir Nighteye held his head and crumpled to the floor with a groan. Sir, Izuku stopped his quirk and raced to the hero. What happened? Are you okay? Nighteye took a couple of deep breaths, his palms still pressed against his temple. He blinked open his eyes, and Izuku watched as the purple glow of the hero's foresight quirk faded. Who are you? Sir Nighteye glowered at Izuku. Sir, what do you mean? I'm Midoriya. No, you know what I mean. Sir Nighteye pushed himself back up to his feet. Your timeline. It's a mess. How is that possible? What happened to you, and who are you? My timeline. Izuku's chest felt cold. Sir Nighteye must have used his foresight quirk on Izuku right before they started fighting. What did you see, sir? Answer me first, the hero snapped. Izuku nodded, then swallowed. I'm from the future. The hero's eyes widened. In my original timeline, Izuku continued, an accident happened in April of next year. I was sent 2 years back in time. So, since last April, I've relived more than a year of my life already. Izuku didn't want to overwhelm Nighteye with too much information, so he waited patiently as the hero processed the information. Sir Nighteye looked askance at the boy but didn't deny his claim. Izuku wondered what the hero had seen through his foresight. What was the accident? Nighteye asked. A little girl named Eri, Izuku said, the sound of her name stabbing his throat. Eri has a rewind quirk. She can rewind a living being to a previous state, but somehow, that day, she was able to rewind time itself. Izuku clasped his hands together. And, actually, Eri is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to come to your agency. But the girl is trapped by a villain called Overhaul, who leads an organization called the 𝐲𝐻𝐼𝐾𝐲. In my last life, you were the one who led the rescue mission. I remember how it went, but I need you, sir, to make sure it can happen again. When did this rescue mission happen? Because till now, I didn't even know this girl existed. Eri gets rescued a couple of months later, but I want to save her as soon as possible, now that I know about it. Sir Nighteye shook his head incredulously, strode back to his office chair, and sat down. That's absurd. All of this is absurd. The hero sat up straight and placed his fingers on the table. As someone whose quirk is literally to read the future, I'm telling you that this is fanciful. Things happen for a reason, Midoriya. This rescue mission. I'm glad that it succeeded, but I'm sure that there were a lot of different circumstances that went into it. The research, the amount of experience the heroes had, the events that led up to it. Sir Nighteye paused, and the timing. Izuku clenched his fists and shook his head. Maybe that matters, but is all of that worth keeping a little girl in pain? You don't know what will happen. She could be in more pain if you act rashly. I can't just wait on the side when I know that an innocent girl is suffering. The feel of her trembling body, the image of her terrified expression, and her silent plea for someone to rescue her from Overhaul's grasp. I need to save her. The room was quiet, with only the sound of the ticking clock. Tick, tick. Nighteye studied Izuku, then sighed. You remind me so much of All Might. Tick, tick. I'll help you, the hero said. Really? Thank you, sir. Izuku bowed, beaming. But then, suddenly, Izuku, a feeling of guilt clawed its way up his throat. Sir Nighteye died saving Eri last time. If Eri was rescued earlier, did that mean Nighteye would die earlier as well? The speed at which your expression changed in the last 2 seconds could break a world record. Nighteye huffed. What is it? Izuku shut his eyes close. Nighteye deserved the truth. Sir Nighteye, spit it out. You died on this mission. Nighteye stared at Izuku, not saying a word. Tick, tick. Izuku didn't dare look up, because, of course, the best way to ask for someone's help is to tell them that they would die helping. Finally, Nighteye replied, if it's a stupid mission, I'll know. If it's a worthwhile mission, I'll also know. I'm going to research this issue for myself, and if it's something worth giving my life for, I would. Sir Izuku felt his eyes watering. But I'm not going to just do whatever you say. I will only help you organize the mission once I'm 100% sure it's plausible. I understand, Izuku nodded firmly. Then, he reached into his backpack, pulled out a notebook, and handed it to Nighteye. This is all I remember from the rescue mission in my last life. The hero flipped through the notes, with Izuku pointing some important details out. Quirk-destroying bullets made from the body of a little girl. Sir Nighteye pushed his glasses into place. If this is true, perhaps it is wise to start the rescue as early as possible. The hero shut the notebook. I'll look deeper into this later. Right now, I must find a way to research the 𝐲𝐻𝐼𝐾 without raising attention. And unfortunately, a lot of these plans won't work out since you can't participate in the rescue. The hero glared at Izuku. I thought it was obvious, time traveler. You don't have a hero license. If you want to save the girl early, you can't join the mission. What? Izuku took a few steps back from the table. Doesn't the law only restrict interns from using their quirks without their mentors? If you were there, I can fight. Sir Nighteye took a deep, annoyed breath. Izuku felt the lecture coming. The law states that even with pro-hero authorization, non-licensed interns may only use their quirks up to a certain extent. This extent was always up to interpretation, but basically, it limited the interns to actions that didn't put any lives at stake. So, authorizing you to lead a raid on a criminal organization that's manufacturing quirk-stopping bullets, with dozens of other pro-heroes and police officers as witnesses. Yeah, that exceeds the certain extent. I don't want to get punished for you, and I don't think you want your mother to either. If you want to make this happen, you need a license. 𝐼𝐺𝐻𝐪. Izuku turned away and walked to the other side of the room to calm himself. He stared at the shelf. There were rows of All Might books that Izuku wished he owned, and if he wasn't worrying about 𝐬𝐽, he would have just plopped down and started reading like a maniac. There's gotta be another way. I can't wait months till I take the provisional license exam. Then my idea would have been for nothing and 𝐬𝐽, but then it hit him. Wait, Izuku whipped his head back towards Sir Nighteye. The provisional license exam, doesn't that happen twice a year? I remember there being another one around now. When's the next license exam? How would I know? Nighteye replied monotonously, I already have my license. Izuku tried not to roll his eyes, then looked it up on his phone. He let out a breath of relief. It's the end of next week. I can still make it. Nighteye raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? What do you mean? It's still, oh no, wait. The registration deadline. Izuku frantically scrolled to the important dates section on the website. Registration closed last week. Izuku went back to staring at the bookshelf, a hand in his hair. This was the first time that he planned something so poorly, because saving 𝐬𝐽 earlier was always a wish, not a full-out plan. I mean, Sir Nighteye's mused. You mean? You do go to one of the most prestigious hero schools in the country. Take advantage of connections. Izuku buried his face in his palms. I can't believe I'm about to do this. Izuku sat nervously outside Principal Nizu's office. Thankfully, Izuku didn't need to explain a lot since Nizu already knew about his time travel. However, Nizu said that he would have to contact the provisional license exam director to register Izuku, and it might not even work. After what seemed like forever, the principal opened the door and stepped out. Congrats, Midoriya, Nizu chirped. I called the Hero Public Safety Commission, and you are now registered for the exam next week. Izuku scrambled up and bowed in gratitude. Thank you, Principal Nizuch. You're very welcome, child, the principal smiled. Usually this doesn't happen, you know. Registering a single student is rare enough, especially for 𝐬𝐽, where entire classes attend at a time. I think this might be the only case of late registration I know of. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. Izuku worried that his decision might have made you look bad. And what if he didn't even pass? He pushed the thought away. No worries. I'm surprised that you didn't want to take the exam with your friends, though. I did, but I don't think that'll be worth it, knowing that I could have saved someone instead. Nizu nodded. I wish you luck on your license and your mission. I hope you save that little girl. It was the second day of the Hero Agency internship week. Good morning, sir. Izuku came into the hero's office and set down his costume case. Do you have anything for me to work on today? Go patrol, and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. Nighteye took a sip from his cup of coffee with his usual annoyed expression. Am I patrolling on my own? I'll be going with you. Another voice suddenly exploded from behind Izuku, making him jump. Togata. Izuku beamed at the sight of the third-year student. Togata was wearing his hero costume, with his signature red cape and 1,000,000 stamped across his chest. His blonde hair and bright blue eyes shined in the late morning sunlight that was pouring through the office windows. You know me? Togata raised his eyebrows. Holy pretzel, I must be famous. Izuku tried to hide his panic. Izuku racked his brain for an excuse. I've seen you from the sports festival. And you're one of the big three, right? I've heard a lot of stories about you. Well, buckle up, my friend, Togata winked, 'cause you're gonna experience all the awesomeness in person now. The third-year student burst into laughter, and Izuku smiled along, glad that Togata was so energetic and will continue to be even when times get dark. I'm just joking. Togata put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. I'm actually really excited to work with you, sports festival winner. Mirio, take Midoriya with you for the morning patrol, Sir Nighteye ordered. Yes, sir. After changing into his hero costume, Izuku followed Togata outside the building and onto their patrol route. As Izuku traveled on the sidewalks, he paid close attention to any alleyway, storefront, or street corner that villains, especially Overhaul, may be lurking in. When they passed the street where they met Eri in his last life, Izuku couldn't help but stop in his tracks. Is something wrong? Togata looked back. No, Izuku stared into the darkness of the alley, then looked away. Nothing's wrong. He must have sounded grim because Togata immediately put on his joking face. Hey Midoriya, what's your hero name? Deku. That's an interesting name. But anyway, Deku, do you want to hear a tip about being a hero? Izuku knew it would probably be a silly joke, seeing the look on Togata's face. Sure. You want to know how heroes keep their cool? How? They have a lot of fans. Right when Izuku was about to facepalm, he heard the voice of a teenage boy yell, "Dude. Is that the UA guy?" Wait, that's right. A girl's shrill voice responded, "It's the first year's sports festival winner." Izuku glanced to his right and realized that he and Togata were passing the entrance of a local high school, where students were trickling in for the weekday morning. A group of teenagers his age was looking right at him in awe. Smile and wave, Togata slapped Izuku on the back. As Izuku stiffly followed Togata's orders, one of the girls came over and asked if Izuku and Togata, who they recognized as the 𝐸𝐴STRPR, could take a selfie with the group. The two hero interns agreed. Of course, Togata had to emphasize that he was not, in fact, the I don't know how I'm going to deal with this part of the job. Izuku sighed in relief as they left the school's vicinity and continued their patrol. It's overwhelming. I'm sure you'll get used to it, Togata laughed. And speaking of the sports festival, what happened with that super-duper long delay before your final round? Izuku didn't see a problem in telling Togata the half-truth. My quirk strengthens my body, and my semi-final round was the first time that I tried strengthening my senses. However, just like how high levels of power can destroy my body, I used too much power on my senses and basically almost fried my brain. That's so cool. I mean, not the brain-frying part. That's not cool. The idea of strengthening your senses. Thanks, Izuku chuckled, and to be honest, maybe I was inspired by you a little too. Really? Doesn't your quirk have a bunch of downsides too? But you still became the strongest hero student I've ever heard of. That's super impressive. I'm glad that you thought that. I'm gonna get even more powerful so I can become a better hero, Togata sighed, his voice turning solemn. You know, it's heartbreaking to think that every single moment, there's someone crying for help. That's why I chose the hero name 𝐸𝐿ion. I'm going to become someone who can save 1,000,000 people. Izuku nodded. I know you will. When they arrived back at the Nighteye agency, Bubble Girl informed the interns that Nighteye had left with Centipeder for an investigation. So, Nighteye wants you, 𝐸𝐿ion, to train Midoriya, the sidekick said. Oh no, Izuku waved his hands, that really won't be necessary. The memory of Togata's punch in the gut almost made Izuku double up again. Come on, it'll be great, Togata said with an innocent smile. Izuku sighed. He knew it would be unpleasant, but deep down, of course, he wanted to try. With his extra experience, he was dying to know whether or not he had closed the distance. Soon, the two made it to an underground room that looked like a large dance studio without mirrors. Izuku had never been in this room before. I've been training here ever since I started studying under Sir. Togata walked to the other end of the room and stretched. Now show me what you've got. Izuku started his attack with a kick, but Togata immediately sunk into the ground and reappeared behind him. Izuku narrowly dodged a punch, then countered with swift attacks. In order to attack, Togata would need to solidify, whether that be a fist or a knee or whatever. So the only way to land a blow, Izuku figured, was to predict where Togata could be attacking from and directly counter that. Okay, Togata smirked, I see what you're doing. You're on the right track, but definitely not enough. Togata barely needed to move to dodge or parry, and most of Izuku's kicks just slipped through Togata's body like air. My turn, Togata vanished into the ground and burst back to the surface with a powerful punch. Izuku managed to block that, but Togata continued to attack from weird angles, warping from place to place. As a result, Izuku only blocked a few more punches before he simply became a punching bag. Power! Togata yelled as he delivered the final blow, a punch to Izuku's gut. Izuku crumpled face first into the ground and groaned in pain. Was that necessary? Togata just laughed. You put up a pretty good fight, first year. Though I'm sure you have a lot more tricks up your sleeve, with a body-destroying and brain-frying quirk like yours. Izuku struggled to his feet. Wish I could improve my combat skills so I'm not always depending on my quirk. You're absolutely on the right track, Togata said encouragingly. Still weak, yeah, but a lot stronger than I expected. Have you trained with Sir yet? Not yet. Well, he'll already be real proud of you. That's some prediction skills right there. But as you said, it's not enough. I need to get faster. No, you have enough speed. What you need is precision. You need to recognize instantly what's the opponent gonna do, and what's the most effective way to defeat him. I can't think that fast. Don't worry, it comes with experience. Izuku nodded, then raised his fists. Is Togata not here today? Izuku asked on the third day of internship week when he arrived. Nope, he's busy with schoolwork, Bubble Girl replied. I think he mentioned that finals were coming soon. But anyway, what do you think about the internship? Is it fun at a hero's workplace? Yeah, I've learned a lot. That's great. How's the new case going for you? Izuku squinted. What new case? You know, the quirk-destroying bullet case. Izuku did a double take, then felt his heartbeat quicken. I'm not really familiar with it yet. Oh, she looked surprised. He seemed really set on letting you help us out with this case, so I assumed that he already got you started with it. Well, anyway, we're investigating this underground organization right now. Since you're here the entire week, you can help us organize some documents. Oh, okay, Izuku breathed. It looked like he was just being treated as an intern helping out with miscellaneous agency tasks. I'll go talk to Sir. He burst into Nighteye's room, then closed the door. I thought you didn't mention my involvement? Izuku's remaining panic leaked through his voice. I didn't, the hero sipped from his coffee. I asked to involve. Makes it more realistic, don't you think? You're gonna be there for the rescue anyway, assuming that you get your license. May as well start making your participation normal now. Izuku sighed but nodded in agreement. Plus, Nighteye added with no expression whatsoever, it's funny seeing you pretend not to know anything. Izuku almost rolled his eyes. He wasn't worried about exposing his time travel since he was pretty good at hiding that now, but it was still annoying. I wouldn't say it's funny. Suddenly, Nighteye's face darkened. Are you saying you have no sense of humor? It's hilarious. Your lack of humor is incurable. The hero's gaze remained cold. Just go along with the sidekicks and help them with small tasks since you'll be here for workplace training anyway. You can start this afternoon. Izuku suddenly fell quiet. What? Nighteye asked. About that, Izuku knew Nighteye was strict, but still, it felt wrong not to tell him. I'm probably going to Hosu this afternoon, and if things go bad, I might miss the rest of the weeks. Is this another meager attempt at humor? It's very likely that the hero killer will be there this evening, Izuku blurted, afraid to look up. Just 2 days ago, Nighteye had given him a lecture on the consequences of not having a hero license. But Izuku needed to go, because my friend will be there too. You're actually serious, Sir Nighteye sighed. So I'm guessing that even if I tell you that both of us will get in trouble, I won't be able to stop you from going. Izuku bit his lip and shook his head. He would have asked Nighteye to go with him, but both of them knew that it would only complicate the situation since Nighteye never went to other cities for missions, even if it was going to be the hero killer. And you do know that if you die, Nighteye continued, the quirk that All Might entrusted to you, and all of his efforts over the years, would go to waste. Izuku nodded. I've always understood the risk. But I can't ignore it when someone's in danger. Even if my friend wasn't there tonight, I would have gone anyway. The hero killer must be stopped, and I know how to beat him. Nighteye sighed heavily, then took off his glasses and pinched his nose bridge. Finally, the hero said, Can I just ask you to do one thing? If you don't need to show yourself, don't. Or else this is going to be a lot of annoying paperwork for me. Understood, sir. Thank you. A soft melody hummed from the bullet train speakers. Then the announcements turned on. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now approaching Hosu City Station. Please ensure that you have all of your belongings. Izuku looked out the window and blinked against the bright orange late afternoon sunlight, flurries of shadows passing over his face as the train neared the station. He wasn't wearing his full hero costume. Instead, he was wearing a plain gray hoodie with a small All Might logo printed on it, a black utility belt, black and his trusty red sneakers. Lightweight arm braces and leg braces were hidden underneath. His clothes. The reason for his casual attire was simple, and was the same as why he didn't ask any other heroes to come with him. He didn't want to attract attention. With his time travel knowledge and lack of a hero license, the fewer witnesses, the better. After he got off the train, he had a small sandwich for dinner, then traveled further into the city. The sun dipped below the cityscape, casting long shadows that stretched across the calm streets. No fire, no chaos. The only abnormal thing about the scene was the light air of apprehension that clung to the citizens on the streets, a distant fear of a murderer who, according to the news, might still be in the city. Izuku glanced at his phone. He still had a couple of hours before the hero killer would appear, but he started making his way to the alley anyway. He didn't remember exactly where it was, so he just walked in the general direction. As he walked, he realized that the number of people on the sidewalks had increased and the traffic on the road had slowed. He reached into his pocket and put on a black mask, then tugged his hood over his fluffy green hair, just in case any of these people were sports festival viewers. It was only when he saw the first police car that he realized the fear on people's faces. He looked further ahead and saw more police cars lined up along the sidewalk, and suddenly a siren screamed to life, and an ambulance zoomed past Izuku toward Hosu's hospital, weaving through traffic. A knot tightened in his stomach. As he neared the large crowd of people, he quickened his pace. His heart. Some people have already started leaving, the crimson and blue lights of police cars casting an eerie glow on their faces. Izuku squeezed himself past concerned onlookers and finally, the scene came into view. His breath hitched in his throat. The dark alleyway had been closed off by yellow tape that fluttered in the early evening breeze. Police officers and a few heroes darted back and forth, in and out of the alley, and when Izuku looked further in the shadows, he spotted a pool of BLD on the ground and splatters of it on the wall. Izuku found it hard to breathe under his mask. With a trembling hand, he turned and tapped the man next to him. "Excuse me, may you tell me what happened here?" "Oh geez, kid, I'm so sorry you had to see this." The man sighed, his gaze dark. "From what I've heard, the hero killer Stain attacked this hero called Native." Izuku took a deep breath. "Is the hero dead?" "I don't know. He got carried into an ambulance." "What about the hero killer?" "Probably being chased down right now." Izuku nodded, then the man left. The crowd gradually thinned, and eventually, only a few people were left hovering near the scene. It didn't make sense. Why did the attack happen earlier? Where was Iida? Was he okay? Maybe the explanation was right in front of Izuku all this time. He looked out into the streets. No fire, no chaos. No Nomu attack. Shigaraki was in charge of that last time. Shigaraki was now locked up in Tartarus. Stain might have worked with Shigaraki last time, so if that didn't happen this time, it could be why the hero killer attacked early. Which means Iida could already be in danger. Right when Izuku was about to leave, he overheard a hero talking to a police officer. "Chaste Endeavor lost him," Izuku heard the hero say. Then Izuku remembered, Endeavor was here too. Hosu City Hero Agency just contacted, the police officer reported. They issued a citywide search for the hero killer. "Hey, you there," another officer suddenly came up to Izuku. "We're clearing this area off, so I need to ask you to leave the scene. There's a villain on the loose, and for your safety, we suggest you stay home." Izuku nodded, then walked away. When the police weren't looking anymore, he turned the corner and walked into another alley. The green light of his quirk lit the walls, and with a few leaps and bounds, he was on top of the building. Crouching down, he scuttered to the opposite edge and peered over, and the crime scene came into view. He could see the BLD more clearly now, a large pool of it, so dark it looked black in the shadows. When he squinted, he saw a few more dark spots that traveled in the opposite direction of where the police cars were, but the trail of BLD disappeared at the alley's opening, which was also closed off by yellow tape. Right when he thought he lost the hero killer's trail, he spotted something else from the corner of his vision. His gaze landed on another building on the other side of the street. Scorch marks. Endeavor must have been chasing Stain earlier, but from what Izuku heard, the hero had lost the criminal. And if Endeavor was looking for the hero killer, Todoroki Shoto wouldn't be far either. Izuku checked the time again. The Nomu attack was likely not going to happen anymore, which was good but didn't make the situation less tricky. The only reason that Izuku, Iida, and Todoroki got away with the fight last time was that there were fewer witnesses due to the Nomu attack. This time, they needed to be a lot more careful if they met the killer. Izuku thought of two scenarios. Number 1, Endeavor or another group of pro-heroes find Stain first, and everything is solved. Number 2, Iida finds Stain first and either gets hurt or gets in trouble fighting without a license. So Izuku had one objective, to make sure Iida didn't find Stain first. But what if Iida asks me why I'm here? Izuku muttered to himself. Since he was working under Nighteye now, there wasn't really a good excuse for being here. Nighteye's words resurfaced, Izuku sighed and silently agreed with his mentor. Then he leaped towards the scorch marks, leaving behind a trail of emerald lightning as the sky began to darken. A gradient from bright orange to deep indigo stretched across the sky as Izuku sprinted in the city. His footsteps echoed through the narrow alleyways as he ran, desperately trying to find a clue, any sign that could lead him to the hero killer. Other heroes were also searching the city, but Izuku made sure to avoid them since he didn't want to get caught without a license. He had followed the scorch marks left behind by Endeavor's quirk, but the trail had come to an end around a minute ago, indicating where the hero lost track of Stain. But now, as Izuku raced through the alleyways with no destination, uncertainty clouded his mind. After a few more pointless turns, he forced himself to stop. Running through the city mindlessly wasn't going to lead him anywhere. He needed to think, to understand the hero killer's motives. What was it that drove Stain to kill heroes? Or, in the killer's words, to sacrifice fake ones. Izuku paused for a moment, then realized he was standing right next to a stinky trash can, and moved to a more pleasant thinking spot. His mind raced, searching for possible places the killer may be at. Stain had always been a radical idealist. If he wanted to make a statement, he might target places near hero agencies. It was only a guess, but it was better than running directionless. Izuku headed toward the city's biggest hero agency and searched its vicinity, but he found nothing except for the earlier crime scene nearby. All I did was backtrack, he muttered to himself, and waste valuable time. The sun had set around 20 minutes ago. The sky was a murky black, and the moon hung ominously behind a sheet of dimly lit clouds. The only light around Izuku, who was standing on a building rooftop, was from a few distant streetlights and a flickering light bulb hanging in front of a small door for people to access the top of the building. Izuku sighed and rubbed his face. If Stain was targeting a specific hero, it would be even more difficult to find him with the heroes scattered across the city. How could Izuku narrow down such a broad range? Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. That's it, Izuku snapped, pulling out his phone. He was going to call Iida, and if that accidentally exposed his time travel knowledge, then let it be. Better than letting Iida get hurt. As he was about to dial the number, coldness rushed over him like a wave. His finger froze, and he shoved his phone back into his pocket and spun around. The light in front of the roof door flickered as usual. Then, the roof was basked in the green glow of One for All. With raised fists, Izuku slowly made his way forward, his heart beating a little too loud. Something small caught his eye. He looked down at the floor, noticing a single drop of crimson liquid. Stain. Izuku breathed in fearful realization. A sharp, needle-like sensation pierced Izuku's mind, and without a second thought, he threw himself sideways, hitting the roof surface with a thump. Then, he got up swiftly, the sight before him sending a chill down his spine. A long, jagged blade reflected the flickering light, held by none other than the hero killer Stain. Izuku could see the killer's messy hair and skeletal mask, and the ripped crimson fabric that flowed behind him in the breeze. But his gaze, a ruthless, cold, 𝐎𝐪𝙎𝗪𝙢𝙀 gaze that made haunting memories resurface. "You looking for me?" the killer's raspy voice said. He was still holding up the sword. Izuku gulped, his focus splitting between the hero killer standing in front of him and the fact that he just awakened the fourth one for all users' quirk, danger sense. "Your logic was interesting," 𝐲𝐸 continued. "You were way off from predicting my location, but compared to all the other pathetic heroes out there looking for me, you were closer? You knew I was trying to find you." Izuku forced himself to ask. "You mutter when you think," the villain replied with a scowl, and Izuku mentally slapped himself. Of course his bad habit had attracted a serial killer to follow him. "Also, you're the kid who won that thing on TV, 𝐲𝐸 continued, his blood curdling intent making it hard to breathe. "You raised your fist. Like All Might. You reminded me of him." Izuku held his breath, shocked that even though he was wearing his hood and his mask, the villains still recognized him. "But there is only one All Might, and others are merely poor imitations of him." The tip of 𝐲𝐸's sword instantly appeared inches away from Izuku's face, merely fakes that must be sacrificed. Suddenly finding courage, Izuku glared at the villain's shadowy face, then pushed himself to his feet, green lightning ablaze. "Nice that you came right to me, 𝐲𝐸. After I stop you, you won't be able to hurt anyone anymore." 𝐲𝐸 raised his sword and it once again pointed at Izuku's face. "You're a child playing make-believe, pretending to be someone you're not. It's not your place to tell me if I have what it takes." Danger sense shot through Izuku's mind and he instinctively dodged a slash of the killer's blade. Then, with a surge of power, Izuku lunged forward. But the hero killer matched his speed, effortlessly sidestepping Deku's attack with an eerie grace. "You call this having what it takes?" 𝐲𝐸 hacked down with his sword. Throwing his arms forward, Izuku released tendrils of black whip from his hands, which held onto the wall of a building next to them. With a tug, Izuku accelerated towards the wall, narrowly dodging 𝐲𝐸's downward slice. Twisting himself in midair, Izuku planted his feet on the wall. Then, with strengthened legs, he kicked off the building's side and heaved his arms. Black Whip tore off pieces of the wall with lightning speed and flung them at 𝐲𝐸, who dodged the worst of it but stumbled across the roof. That moment of instability was all Izuku needed. Focusing his power, his limbs became a blur as he unleashed a flurry of devastating punches, each strike aimed with precision. But the hero killer's swordsmanship was so refined that it looked ethereal. 𝐲𝐸 deflected blow after blow and mixed in counterattacks, and to avoid getting sliced, Izuku backed away. Then, 𝐲𝐸 pulled his sword back as if preparing for a large swing, but just as Izuku was about to duck, Danger Sense screamed at Izuku, prompting him to immediately leap back instead. In his other hand, 𝐲𝐸 had just whipped out a small dagger, and if Izuku hadn't dodged back, there would already be a hole in his abdomen. A breath of relief escaped Izuku's mouth, but the fear of almost getting impaled was still making his heart pound furiously. A sinister smile curved beneath the hero killer's mask. "Interesting." 𝐲𝐸 sprinted forward, swiftly his dagger for another long sword. Izuku took a deep breath. The hero killer was probably the most dangerous villain Izuku had fought since his time travel, and the boy realized that if he didn't want to die here, he couldn't just rely on Danger Sense telling him what to do. An idea struck him. Then, just like he did during the sports festival, he directed the strengthening power of One for All to his senses. But instead of simply transferring energy, he focused on only drawing a sliver of power as if sipping through a straw. The killer's blade slowed. A split second later, Izuku's strengthened punch connected with the hero killer's face and sent the villain tumbling across the roof, stopping right before the ledge. Izuku couldn't help but utter out loud, remembering the events from the day before. The hero killer pushed himself back to his feet, eyes glinting dangerously. Izuku closed the distance. 𝐲𝐸 swiped his hand, and several knives and daggers flew at Izuku like bullets. Then, for an instant, the scene slowed as Izuku activated Zenith Focus and exposed 𝐲𝐸's movements. The flying daggers were a distraction that could be easily dodged, and the real danger was actually the short sword swirling down from the sky. Seeing the hero killer's stance, Izuku also predicted that the villain would dart to the side in order to distract Izuku and let the short sword fall right through his head. The meticulous sequence of the killer's attack sent a chill down Izuku's spine, but he was ready. The slowed instant came to an end and Izuku shot Black Whip at the short sword falling down on his head, redirecting its downward momentum in a large arc so that it collided with the array of flying daggers with a series of metallic whacks. Still holding onto Black Whip, Izuku heaved the pile of blades towards the left, smacking into a surprised hero killer. The force slammed Stain over the building ledge, the blades clattering against the walls as they fell down into the alley. Not wasting a second, Izuku leaped over the edge and landed in the alley with a soft thump, but as he squinted in the darkness, he realized that Stain was nowhere to be seen. Rotating warily, Izuku searched for any slight movement in the shadows. Danger sense came to life in his head like a zap, but Izuku ignored the consuming urge to dodge and immediately activated the instant of concentration from Zenith Focus. Then, something unexpected happened. Even though he didn't increase the power of One for All, his surroundings presented itself not in slow motion, but in a freeze frame just like the sports festival. Wasting the frozen instant, Izuku quickly directed his attention to the hero killer emerging from the shadows behind him. Stain's sword was drawn, aimed at Izuku's lower back. In the next breath, Izuku had spun around. The sword slipped past his torso and his strengthened fist collided with Stain's face. The full force of his punch sent the villain hurtling back and bouncing on the alley ground like a skipping stone. As the enemy struggled to get up, Izuku recalled how he felt when strengthening his senses. His reaction had heightened significantly, but there was no side effect, no trembling muscles or throbbing headache. Izuku felt a shaky smile spread across his face. Usually, the fourth user's quirk forced him to dodge without thinking, and for Zenith Focus, too much power meant devastating side effects. But with this new combination, he could take advantage of the inadequate defense of an ambusher and respond with a calculated counterattack instantly. As if to prove his point, the hero killer stumbled again, struggling to recover. But of course, the upgraded danger sense didn't allow Izuku to automatically beat his enemies. He lowered himself to a fighting stance, and One for All surged in his body. However, just as he was preparing to strike, there was a loud whirring sound. The hero killer spun around and kicked something behind him, and a loud grunt sounded from the other side of the alley, followed by a heavy clank of armor crashing into the ground. Izuku's heart skipped a beat when he saw who the killer was facing. Iida Tenya was lying on the ground in his full hero costume, trembling either in pain or anger. Izuku couldn't tell. Stain's killing intent increased the air pressure in the narrow alley. Hero killer. Iida pushed himself off the ground. I come in the name of Ingenium, and you will pay for what you did to my brother. Hey Manuel, we got a role. A hero, who Tenya didn't know the name of, called from the agency entrance. In a minute, Manuel, Tenya's mentor, waved for the other hero to go on, then turned back to the boy. Iida, I know you really want to go with us to search for the hero killer. I know that's why you're here in Hosu anyway. But as your supervisor, I can't let you go. You have to stay here at the agency. I'm not going to hurt myself, Tenya seethed. Please, Manuel. The demon responsible for incapacitating my brother just hurt another hero. How can I sit here and wait? Manuel sighed, but his eyes remained kind and patient. From what the agency told us, endeavors here at Hosu too. Surely you can trust the number 2 hero to bring the villain to justice. Tenya didn't get why Manuel was so determined not to let him join the search, and the image of his brother lying helplessly on the hospital bed flashed in his mind again. But he forced a deep breath. If Endeavor's for sure going to find and capture the villain without any of our help, doesn't that make it a safe environment for me to practice searching? Outsmarting me by answering my questions with your questions isn't going to change the fact that you might be in danger. I can handle danger. Manuel shook his head in defeat. Fine. Since I can't stop you, I may as well keep you in my sight. Let's go. This moment might have felt victorious for Tenya if he wasn't already thinking about how he would make the hero killer pay. But after he stormed in front of Manuel for a couple of minutes, ignoring the hero's intermittent warnings to slow down, it occurred to Tenya that he had no idea where the hero killer was or where he would be. Begrudgingly, Tenya finally slowed down and trailed behind the pro hero, who redirected them back to their usual patrol route. Wandering around only makes the search more inefficient, the hero taught, but Tenya barely listened. He followed the hero until the sun set and the streetlights turned on, but there was still no sight of the villain. "It's getting a little late," Manuel said. "I don't think the hero killer is in this area, so I won't keep you then. You should go back to the agency." A part of Tenya wanted to keep looking for Stain, but his hope had dwindled, so he agreed. "You need me to take you back?" "No, I'll be fine on my own." "All right then. Have a good evening, Iida." "You too, Manuel." The walk back was somewhat peaceful. The sky was a dark purple, and moonlight shined through a sheet of clouds. But again he thought of his brother. Since his anger had dimmed, only sadness remained. When his thoughts finally tired him out, he noticed that he had unintentionally strayed away from the path back to the agency, then heaved a sigh and started back. But only moments later, he heard a series of clattering in the distance that sounded like metal falling to the ground. He squinted in the sound's direction but couldn't see its source, and a bad feeling crept into his stomach. Adjusting his helmet, he jogged toward the street where he heard the clattering. Suddenly, he saw something glinting in the dim streetlight near the mouth of an alley. "What is that?" He slowed down and took a couple more steps, and when the object's outline became clear, a guttural sound spouted from his throat. A blade! His engines whirred to life, and the next moment he was sprinting towards the alley where the blade was sticking out from. The inside of the alley came into view, and with a jolt, Tenya saw him, the hero killer, back facing Tenya, with swords of different lengths strapped to his body. Amazed that he caught the villain off guard, Tenya's engines shifted to a higher gear, his kick flying towards Stain. Too late did Tenya realize that his engines weren't exactly the quietest things in the world. The villain spun around and slammed a foot in Tenya's sternum, making him crash into the ground. Shaking, Tenya looked up at the villain, whose crimson eyes pierced through the darkness and solidified the air around them. But Tenya wasn't afraid. He shoved himself back up to his feet as Stain's gaze simply followed. "Hero killer." Tenya spat, "I come in the name of Ingenium, and you will pay for what you did to my brother." A blade whizzed past Tenya's ear as Stain twirled it in his hand in a smooth motion, then held it still. The villain's gaze was fixed on the boy as if considering where to stab him first. Suddenly, Tenya didn't feel as brave anymore, but he hit it with a clenched fist. "I remember your brother," the killer said, his voice reverberating through the alley. "Foolish. Proud. Not too different from you. What? You come here for vengeance?" Stain boomed. "This hero society is rotten to the core, seeing what this new generation has become. But it's fine. I'll kill you off one by one if it means eradicating fakes from this world." For a brief moment, Stain turned his head slightly over his shoulder to look at something behind him, but Tenya only cared about taking advantage of the enemy's distraction. Spinning around, Tenya attacked with a kick propelled by his engines, the whirring noise echoing in the shadows. With an eerie speed, the hero killer batted away the kick with an elbow, and then there was a long sword slashing at Tenya. Before Tenya could react, a figure blurred in front of him and slammed the killer against the wall. The newcomer's head was hidden under a hood. Then, with a sickening flash of silver light, Stain's dagger slashed upward and Tenya could see that it was now tainted dark crimson. The hooded figure winced but held tightly onto Stain. Grotesquely, Stain lifted the bloody blade in front of his mouth and glided his tongue across it. Instantly, the hoodie figure stopped moving. Tenya realized with a shiver. Stain shoved the stiff body off of him and kicked it away like a soccer ball, the spikes on the villain's boots making more drops of BLD spray on the alley floor. "I'll finish you first," Stain hissed, turning to Tenya. The villain's tone riled Tenya, and the sound of engines grew until it seemed to rattle the walls next to them. Then, in the blink of an eye, Tenya zoomed past Stain, landing a punch hard enough to break a brick wall. He then spun around and kicked at Stain's exposed flank, but the villain knocked the attack away despite the neck-breaking speed. The hero killer looked disappointed. "A person just risked his life trying to save yours, and is now in a position where I can deliver a fatal blow whenever I please," the hero killer stated, "and you, hero in turn, did not even to rescue the poor soul." Tenya glanced at the person sprawled in the shadows further in the alley. The hooded figure was trembling, clearly trying to resist whatever effect Stain had caused. A sudden wave of guilt washed over Tenya. How in the world did he simply overlook another person's existence? The rage burning like a furnace in him suddenly died down. He had failed the basic concept of what a hero was. Then, Tenya's shoulders tensed as Stain raised his sword to his lips, a drop of blood balanced on the sharp edge. Instinctively, Tenya looked down at his own right leg and saw that the fabric of his costume was torn, revealing a small cut. He looked back at Stain, but before he could do anything else, his body froze. "I want you to watch this next part closely," Stain said with a disgusted frown, raising a knife and aiming it at the hooded figure behind him. "This is the consequence of being driven by selfishness." The knife flew down at the immobilized figure. "Oh!" Tenya cried through his stiff lips. His brother would have saved the hoodie person. But Tenya didn't. At that moment, all of the hero killer's words finally sank in, and Tenya wanted to rush to protect the figure, but his body wouldn't budge. The person was going to die because of him. And he didn't even know what that person looked like. Then, without warning, the temperature in the air dropped and the knife stopped in its tracks. Starting from the mouth of the alley to Tenya and the hero killer and the knife, the alleyway was covered in ice. The villain struggled to no avail as all 4 of his limbs were frozen. "Thank goodness I didn't come too late." "Todoroki." Tenya breathed. A warm hand pressed against Tenya's back and the ice sizzled, then melted. "Sorry I froze you, Iida." Todoroki stepped forward and came into view, his white and red hair ruffled. "It was the only way I could stop that knife." He turned his gaze to the frozen weapon that was centimeters away from taking a life. The hooded figure was still sprawled on the ground, now behind a wall of ice that kept the knife in place. "Who's that?" Todoroki stared at the hoodie guy. "I don't know," Tenya replied, still immobilized despite being freed from the ice. "You can't move?" "It's the hero killer's quirk, and I think it's triggered by ingesting a target's blood, understood," Todoroki uttered in a low and cautious voice. "I already texted Endeavor, he'll be coming soon." "How did you find me?" "I was lucky to be close by, and your engines aren't exactly the quietest things in the world." "I'm aware. I'm gonna go get that hoodie guy over there." Stay here, I guess." As Todoroki made his way to the hoodie person, a fissure suddenly appeared in Stain's ice cage and dozens of flying knives mixed with ice shards exploded in all directions. Todoroki raised an ice barrier in front of him and tried to cover Tenya, too, but it couldn't stop a knife from lodging itself in Tenya's right shoulder. The force tipped Tenya back as he cried out in pain, but his body was still unable to move as he crashed to the ground. Now, with his eyes facing the sky, he could only hear the clamor of fighting and the sound of his own beating heart. Blood flowed from his shoulder and pooled at the base of his helmet. Waves of coldness and heat rolled past, and a blast of fire flashed in the corner of his vision. Despite being immobilized on the ground and having a knife sticking out of his shoulder, Tenya's mind wandered, remembering how the green-haired boy came up to Tenya before students left for the hero internship week. Tenya thought with a sad smile. Tenya's body refused to move, but he clenched at his muscles and prepared himself. The moment Stain's quirk releases him, he will dive straight back into battle and do whatever he can to protect Todoroki and the hooded victim. Because he promised Midoriya. He promised that even though he lost at the sports festival, he would try his best to improve and catch up. Because that's the kind of hero ingenium should be. The hero killer's gaze seemed as sharp as his blades. As Todoroki Shoto desperately tried to fend off the villain's attacks with walls of ice and waves of fire, the killer's piercing, blood-red eyes made Shoto want to just give up and surrender. She stared at the dim lights above her head. The lights were always dim, and sometimes they were just turned off altogether, deserting the room in a gloomy darkness. There were no windows. There was a lamp on the nightstand, but the color of its light was a sickly yellow, so she never turned it on. She wanted a little night light like the one she had before, but she learned a long time ago that it didn't matter what she wanted. A few toys were scattered on the ground, but she found no joy in them. She didn't have any energy to play with them, and all she wanted to do right now was to curl up in a little ball. Maybe she could draw, but her arms, wrapped in bandages, were always too sore. Beep! The sound of the door sliding open made her look away from the ceiling lights to the doorway. The hall outside was brighter than the room, so she could only see the silhouette of the man in the lab coat. Another BLD test. "Come on," the man said simply, knowing the girl would comply. In the first few days, she would thrash and cry and scream when the adults dragged her to the labs. She had hoped that this was just a bad dream where the memories of her past came to haunt her. She had hoped she would just wake up in her sunlit room, look out her window, and see the blue glassy building again. But a long time has passed since she returned to the dim, windowless room. This was a real, living nightmare. She pushed herself off the bed and walked slowly to the man at the doorway. No point in resisting, they'll drag her there anyway. She followed the man into another room further down the hallway. This room was dim, with a cold beam of light shining on the large reclining chair. She sat on the chair and placed her arms on the cold metal armrests, and the man started to remove her bandages. Every time her bandages were removed, she thought about the Christmas party where the nice older kids let her slowly tear apart the wrapping paper and reveal the gifts. But like all the other happy memories before the nightmare, the Christmas party seemed so long ago, the details fading into cold lab chairs and dull white bandages, but she didn't want to forget. She liked gifts. "Everyone is always so happy to see you smile, Eri," the person with yellow hair and blue eyes had said to her once. She barely twitched as the sharp needle punctured her arm. Red liquid flowed through the tube into a whirring machine next to her. The lab coat man, who had a long pointy mask, pressed different buttons on the machine and occasionally peered at the monitor. Then he removed the needle and reached for the straps on the sides of the chair. Moments later, the girl was buckled and strapped to the chair. The door opened again. The lighting made it impossible to see the person entering, but just by the sound of footsteps and muffled breathing, she knew exactly who it was. "Boss?" The lab coat man dipped his head. Overhaul stepped next to the whirring machine and squinted at the monitor. He clicked his tongue in disappointment. Her heart lurched. If the whirring machine didn't give him what he wanted, that meant he was going to cut her open. No, her voice was a soft whimper, and she wanted to leave this chair, but she was strapped down. No. Chisaki's hoarse voice was an anvil striking down on her mind. "Your quirk is a curse." "A curse? What makes you think you can just say no and walk away?" She remembered what the nice older kids once told her. "Your quirk is a blessing, not a curse." The sharp knife came down on her arm. The pain made her want to scream, but she was too exhausted to do so, and screaming never helped anyway. She remembered how the person with the yellow hair and blue eyes had held her in his arms. She remembered first meeting the older boy with fluffy green hair and wide emerald eyes. Deku, her whisper was so soft she could barely hear it over the whirring machine. Lemillion, since the day this nightmare started, she realized that she was living in a memory. Everything that was happening to her now had happened before. She was reliving every torturing moment spent in this cold lab, with the needles injecting her with fluids she did not know, with the sharp blades slicing open her skin and blood welling out, with Chisaki's hand reaching out to her face, and with the terrible pain of being ripped apart like a piece of paper, then glued back together. But somewhere in a protected corner of her mind, there was a small glimmer of hope. It was like a little nightlight in the darkness. If she was experiencing all the bad moments again, would she be rescued again as well? Overhaul took off his glove and reached toward her. The next 4 days of the internship week went by quickly. Sir Nighteye worked with his sidekicks and Izuku to research the 𝐒𝐩𝐼 𝐻𝐼. With the help of Izuku's notes, unbeknownst to the sidekicks, of course, the agency gathered enough information to get a basic understanding of what was happening to Eri. On the last day of the internship, Izuku stepped into Nighteye's office. "You leaving?" Sir Nighteye asked without looking up from a stack of reports on the 𝐒𝐻𝐼 𝐻𝐼. "Yes, sir," Izuku nodded. "Do you think we'll be able to carry out the rescue plan?" "I still need time to decide about that. But the best-case scenario is it can happen in the next month or two." Izuku tightened his grip around his costume case. "Understood." The hero looked up from his papers and adjusted his glasses. "Midoriya, on the first day of the internship, you asked me why I gave you an offer. Well," he looked toward his wall at the All Might poster. "I was impressed," he continued, "specifically by how you raised your fist. That was the tipping point." Izuku followed the hero's gaze to the picture of his predecessor. Because Izuku wasn't looking at Nighteye, he couldn't tell if there was a smile in Sir's voice when he said, "Thus, I wanted to ensure that you would become the best successor you could be. 𝐎𝐻𝐻𝐻. Kirishima's laughter boomed in the classroom, followed by Siro's strangled giggling. Holy Sir! What the heck, Bakugo? What on earth did Best Genius do to you? Shut the hell up, you morons. I'll kill you both. I'd like to see you try, pretty boy. What did you just call me? Bakugo roared, his slick back hair instantly exploding back into its spiky form. Iida. Todoroki. Mina squealed. Did you two actually get caught up in the fight with Stain? Iida and Todoroki both nodded. How did you guys make it back alive? Kirishima asked. Endeavor saved you guys, right? 𝐎𝐸𝐿 said. Yeah, Todoroki replied. He did? Dude, Kaminari pulled up a video on his phone. Stain's gone viral. Izuku stood from his chair. May I see the video too? Sure. Kaminari set his phone on a desk, and both of them watched the edit of the hero killer. Izuku frowned slightly. The videos differed from his last life since the event changed so much without the Nomu attack. Izuku wondered bitterly if Stain was still going to inspire more villains. Later in the afternoon, All Might took the class to Field Gamma, the training ground characterized by long winding pipes. Izuku remembered that this lesson was the first time his class learned about his ability to, well, not break his bones. This time, with a few bounds and leaps, he easily surpassed his classmates and won the race. By this point, his classmates were not surprised at Izuku being the top student. Bakugo just huffed in annoyance but didn't cause a scene. Classes and training almost seemed to return to normal until the very next day. Midoriya, Iida said as they found a seat in the cafeteria, about that day before internship week when you said I can talk to you if I need it. I apologize for my attitude. I was angry about my brother's injury, but I was wrong to take it out on others. Apology accepted. I'm just glad you're okay now. Izuku smiled warmly. Suddenly, Izuku's smile disappeared when he watched Kaminari sprint toward him like a lightning bolt, zigzagging through the cafeteria crowd. What's wrong? Izuku asked when Kaminari tried to catch his breath next to their lunch table. Okay, so Kaminari gasped for air. Someone caught a glimpse of the documentation in the teacher's office and mentioned it and told this guy in Class B, who then told it to this other guy. Then I heard about it, and now the entire school probably knows. Kaminari, what are you talking about? I'm trying to say you're taking the provisional license exam over the weekend. What? Iida spun toward Izuku. Uraraka, who sat at a nearby table with Azui, also stood up and stared incredulously. Oh boy. Izuku didn't really think this part through. But obviously he would attract attention for his decisions sooner or later. The cafeteria had gone uncomfortably quiet as students glanced at the first-year tables in confusion. Yes, Izuku breathed. I am? Are you serious? What? That's crazy. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the surrounding students. Dude, Kaminari initially looked shocked but then laughed. I don't know if I should be surprised anymore. That's pretty demon cool, not gonna lie. Wait. Uraraka scrambled to Izuku. Why didn't you tell us? I was going to eventually. But very few first years attempt the exam, Iida said, much less the first semester. A few tables down, Bakugo just huffed in annoyance again. Then, before Izuku could explain himself further, a group of students made their way to his table. A crowd was also starting to form. Oh great, second-year students. Midoriya Izuku, the leader of the second-year group, a boy with orange-red hair and a contemptuous glare, approached Izuku. You're taking the exam over the weekend? Izuku stood up from his seat. We happen to be taking it on that day too, the older boy, psychologically younger, considering Izuku's time travel, said, although, unfortunately, we'll be in different sites since it's a rule to split up different classes. Izuku simply raised an eyebrow. The second year glared even harder but then grinned as if amused. What would you say to a sparring match with me? He sneered, after school in Gym Beta. Now, Izuku recognized him, Amari Mau. He wasn't the best student among UA second years, but he was definitely one of the stronger ones. Izuku didn't remember clearly, but this guy might have gotten third or fourth at the sports festival. You can turn it down, Uraraka whispered to Izuku. These people are a year older than us. Izuku smiled at Uraraka. then turned his gaze back to the crowd, scanning the second years and landing on Amari. "I'll see you after school, then," Izuku said. Gym Beta was one of the smaller gyms and was usually open after school for independent training. Robots monitored the ground, but since a crowd had gathered for the sparring match, Hound Dog also stood to the side and kept an eye on things. Izuku arrived at the gym with Uraraka and Iida beside him and all of his other classmates who stayed after school following behind. Izuku's second-year opponent, Amari, was waiting. A wide grin spread across his face when Izuku came into view. "There he is." Izuku didn't really know what to do or say in this situation, so he just smiled awkwardly as he stopped in front of Amari. "Woo! Let's go." A voice boomed in the gym, attracting all eyes toward the origin. "Togata." Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of the overenthusiastic third-year student among the spectators, along with Heido Nijire and Amajiki Tamaki, the rest of the big three. Heido smiled warmly and Amajiki faced the wall, his body language making it clear that he didn't want to be here. "Don't mind us, boys," Heido said. "We just wanted to witness the underclassmen drama, that's all." Amari seemed to be pumped up by the unexpected audience, turning back to Izuku with a proud expression. "The big three is watching, Midoriya." Amari smirked. "I was planning to go easy on you, but don't blame me for going all out now." "Okay." Amari's smirk vanished. "But I didn't expect the disrespect." "Oh, I apologize. I'll do my best." Amari rolled his eyes, his smug smile returning as if he couldn't believe how pathetic his opponent was. He took a shallow bow. "If you please." Izuku returned the bow, and the match began. Heat exploded in the gym as Amari extended his arms out, and around him, glowing orange-red blobs took form, reshaping in the air and merging into a viscous stream of molten lava. A couple of minuscule drops hovered higher above, probably meant to be unnoticeable but painfully obvious to Izuku. He took note that there would probably be a surprise attack later. Izuku lowered his stance, a small figure of green lightning against the theatrical display of red-hot magma. Izuku could feel himself starting to sweat because of the heat and knew very well that even slight contact with the liquid would cause a pretty bad burn. But the lava would have to catch him first. Like snakes striking, the lava split into separate streams and shot toward Izuku, but the first year had already vanished in a flash of green and blinked into view in front of Amari, his arm pulled back in the position for a punch. The second year's face distorted with surprise, his instincts managing to bring his arms up in a sloppy defense position. If it was purely based on combat skills, the match would have ended here. But luckily for Amari, he had a lava quirk. The red-hot liquid formed in front of his arms, but Izuku saw it coming. His punch stopped midway and he dropped down with a swift kick that swept Amari's legs out from underneath him. Amari landed on his back with a grunt but quickly turned himself around and slammed a palm on the floor. Izuku dodged out of the way and flashed to the other side of the gym as a column of lava erupted from the floor like a volcano, showering the gym with glowing drops of destruction. There were some yelps from the spectators as the lava flew and sizzled around them, but rings of yellow energy waves then shielded the lava. "Careful, boys," Heido said, her arms extended as she used her quirk, wave motion, to protect the spectators from stray lava. Seemingly embarrassed by being reprimanded by one of the big three, Amari became distracted for a second, which Izuku took advantage of. In a blur of green, Izuku sprinted toward his opponent and delivered a kick that sent Amari flying back. The tiny droplets of lava floating in the air that Izuku noticed at the beginning started to waver and grow, then burst apart like fireworks. Izuku slammed his fist into his palm, creating a shield-like shockwave that reflected the lava splashes away. Amari had managed to get back on his feet, and lava had condensed around his fists. With a yell, the second year sprinted toward Izuku, each step leaving pools of lava that quickly covered the gym floor, giving no space for Izuku to step on. However, the expanse of lava stopped just before it reached Heido's wave barrier, making Izuku appreciate Amari's control over his quirk. Amari drew his lava-coated fist, ready to strike. Only the small area where Izuku stood was not covered in lava. Amari smirked, knowing that he had Izuku trapped. Calmly, Izuku lifted his fist and slammed it hard into the ground. The shockwave threw Amari back and burst away the lava on the floor. Immediately, Izuku grabbed Amari with Black Whip, and with a heave, flung Amari to the floor. Before the second year could react, Izuku's fist crashed into the ground right next to Amari's head, and the only sound in the gym was the resounding echo of the final strike. Amari's breathing was heavy, his face frozen in shock and his eyes glinting with fear. Suddenly, Izuku was reminded of the battlefield, and the face in front of him flickered and molded into the faces of low-level villains with the same expressions before their defeat. He then wondered if this was what he looked like when he lost the war, when he could do nothing but watch Shigaraki escape. He shook his head. It was always sporadic moments like these when the haunting feelings of his past life crept into his mind and suffocated him. "Woo! Let's go!" Togata's voice broke the silence. The first-year students in the gym clapped and cheered. Some second years cheered, most clapped politely, and others stood silently. "Good match." Izuku smiled and extended his hand. Amari grabbed it and Izuku pulled him to his feet. The lava sizzled and dissipated in smoke. "Your control on your quirk is really good," Izuku said. "Thank you, I know," Amari snapped, then sighed and took a deep breath. "You're pretty darn good for a first year. I try my best. You better not embarrass 𝐒𝐽𝐽 this weekend at the license exam." Izuku chuckled. "Don't worry, I won't. Good luck." The day of the provisional license exam. Izuku was assigned to a testing site different from his last life and couldn't help but stare at the stadium in awe. This stadium was even larger than the one before, its exterior a myriad of white and sky blue. "Let's go." Aizawa stepped off the bus and led Izuku toward the structure and through its tall glass doors. "Whoa," Izuku breathed as he took in the interior of the registration hall. It had a tall ceiling and a floor with white marble tiles that made it look more like a fancy hotel lobby than a testing site. "Isn't this your first time?" Aizawa muttered as he watched Izuku stare at the ceiling. "I've never been to stadium before," Aizawa grumbled. "Or this entirely. Whatever risk you're taking today better be worth it because I had to wake up early for this. Thank you for being here. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my license." Izuku bowed. "Good luck, I'll be in the audience stand." Aizawa left and Izuku went to the locker room to change into his hero costume. After that, the boy followed a swarm of students into a large room similar to the holding area from the last license exam. An ocean of students was crammed here, and a giant screen at the front displayed the words, "Provisional License Exam Orientation." As Izuku settled in the crowd, he noticed people around him whispering and tossing glances at him, but he ignored them. "Attention," a woman's voice boomed in the hall through the speakers. Izuku fixed his gaze on the announcer at the front stage. "On behalf of the Public Safety Commission, welcome to the Provisional License Exam. I will now announce the rules for this exam. Please listen carefully." A palpable tension arose from the candidates around Izuku. He was nervous too. The exam content changed every time, and he was going into this with no prior experience. The exam would be divided into two parts. I will only explain Part 1, as Part 2 will be revealed to those who pass Part 1. In Part 1, each of you will be given 2 wristbands, each with 10 lights that represent the amount of points you have. You start with 8 points, so 4 lights on each wristband are already lit. Your objective is to take away points from other candidates and obtain 20 points in total, lighting up both wristbands entirely. The gears in Izuku's head spun rapidly. Already, this test was a lot different than the one before, which involved a dodgeball-like elimination game. "There are 2 ways to take points." The announcer lady motioned to the huge screen, which displayed a diagram of the wristband. "The first way is by pressing a button located on the side of each wristband, which will activate a light beam. Point the light beam at your opponent, and their points will automatically transfer to you, 1 point per 2 seconds exposed under the light." Izuku carefully watched the on-screen animation. Basically, the first way to get points was like shining a flashlight at someone. It seemed simple, but he knew capturing a hero trainee with such a narrow light for 2 seconds would be impossible if the opponent wasn't immobilized or caught off guard. "The second way," the announcer continued, "is through attacks. With your wristbands, you will also receive additional damage trackers to place on your bodies. The amount of damage needed for a point varies by person, but expect each point to represent about 3 to 4% of the impact you can take in normal training circumstances. The announcer mentioned a few more rules, including how people from the same school couldn't take points from each other, probably to prevent weaker candidates from passing simply because they were teammates with stronger candidates. Not that it applied to Izuku, anyway. Finally, if all your points are taken away, you are eliminated. There are 831 candidates actually, that number was updated. The announcer squinted at her script. There are 832 candidates at this test site. The first 300 students to pass Part 1 will move on to the next phase. That's almost 40%, Izuku mumbled, right? Because before All Might's retirement, the passing rate was much higher. After the announcer finished, the room was full of chatter and schools huddled together to discuss strategy. People from the Public Safety Commission walked around and passed out testing equipment. "Thank you," Izuku said when he received his gadgets. He slipped on the 2 silver wristbands, their small lights unlit, and attached the 2 damage trackers to the sides of his legs. Then, with a loud rumbling noise, the right wall of the orientation room opened, first revealing a thin rectangle of harsh sunlight, then slowly expanding to display the full view of the site. Some candidates watched with anticipation, others grew restless. When Izuku's eyes adjusted to the light, he took in the scene and tightened his fists. The woods were silent. Izuku stood alone at the designated spot for Yui, enveloped by the whispering of leaves and the gentle sway of branches. The dappled sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow upon the forest floor. He was close to the edge of the woods, and past the trees, Izuku could see the nearby cityscape with tall glass and concrete buildings. Suddenly, Izuku's wristbands vibrated, drawing his attention. Expectedly, 4 of the 10 lights on each wristband lit up in a soft white glow, like 8 small diamonds glinting in the sunlight. Then, a large beep sounded through the speakers. "First test, begin." He took a deep breath, then strolled toward the border between the forest and the city. As anticipated, Izuku heard the slight rustle of leaves and saw a shimmer of orange from the corner of his eyes. He whipped his body sideways, dodging a zigzagging orange laser beam, which sliced through a tree next to him, splinters flying. Immediately, he threw his arm forward, a tendril of darkness shooting ahead and fastening around an exposed arm. With a tug, Izuku yanked the poorly hidden candidate towards him and used the person as a human shield to block an incoming rainbow-colored arrow. The arrow disappeared into a puff of rainbow smoke before hitting the candidate, so just as Izuku guessed, these people were from the same school. There was no point for the others to hide now. More candidates emerged from behind trunks and shrubs, a swarm of hero costumes and attacks that swerved and shifted among the trees. Izuku dodged another rainbow arrow and leaped over a swirling white disc, then darted away as a large spike of rock pierced upward from the ground. Close-range fighters charged toward him, but he was impossible to catch, a blurry green image flying from tree to tree. Izuku considered just diving in and attacking. There were plenty of people here and more than enough points to pass. However, he still had no gauge of how much force he needed, and he didn't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily. Then, he stopped on a clearing beyond the last few trees of the forest sector, the mock city buildings towering on the other side. He looked around. The group chasing him in the forest stepped out of the trees and stopped a couple of feet away, also noticing what was on the other side. Another group of candidates, clearly an assembly of multiple different schools, emerging from the city sector and blocking Izuku's way. Izuku spun around slowly, assessing his situation. At least 50 people surrounded him, and there might have been more among the trees and on top of the city buildings. They all stared Izuku down like a mob of hyenas closing on their prey. Well, isn't it the famous UA first year? Someone called from the crowd. Izuku wondered why they didn't just attack. They probably found the idea of a singular, first-year UA candidate amusing. "Don't know if you heard of this before, newbie," someone else said with a voice filled with mock pity, "but there's an opening tradition for this test. It's called the crushing of UA." To the taunter's dismay, Izuku smiled at the scene. Suddenly, he felt as if he was standing alongside his 1A classmates again, surrounded by opponents yet fearless. Everything almost felt normal, as if he was again fighting with the sole purpose of following his dream. Izuku's smile vanished, and the haunting heaviness returned. Getting his license, becoming a hero, it wasn't merely a dream anymore. It was also his duty that he carried alone. Izuku raised his gaze. The people closest to him flinched back. The ground beneath him reflected the emerald blaze of his quirk. He clenched his fists. Bring it on. Attacks converged upon him. Arrows, blades, fists, blasts, rocks, spikes, and light beams from the wristbands blurred together and met at the place where Izuku stood. He zipped from side to side, dodged the projectiles, ducked under a swinging punch, tripped 3 people in a row with a low kick, leaped into the air, brought his heel crashing down on someone with silver armor, backflipped to avoid an intersection of wristband light beams, shot Black Whip toward the air, grabbed someone with seagull-like wings, and pulled down, making the person slam into someone else who flashed right beside him in a flicker of gold. Then he noticed his surroundings brighten and realized that a group of candidates had coordinated and pointed their wristband lights at him from all directions, focusing on him like spotlights on a stage actor. One light beam was nothing to fear. But all of them together. It would only take 2 seconds to get him eliminated. He heightened his power and darted away, but with every turn he met a wall of opponents, allowing some of the light beams to keep up. Let's try something else. Then Izuku sprung up high into the air, the attackers below whipping their heads at the sky in confusion. As he started to fall, he spun forward, and a split second later he was somersaulting downward like a green comet, building up momentum. When he neared the ground, he pulled back his fist and wrapped Black Whip around his arm for reinforcement. California smash. His fist collided with the ground and shattered the surface. Cracks exploded outward, the ground shook violently, and combined with a gust of wind, the force sent his attackers tumbling. Straightening himself, Izuku studied the sprawling candidates through the dust, then spotted an opening, a group of disoriented students wearing ninja-like hero costumes, slightly removed from the greater crowd. Ugh, a ninja in the group pushed himself off the ground. This first year, how is he this strong? He's probably better than a lot of pros by now, another ninja groaned and coughed in the dust. What a monster! Suddenly, Izuku appeared above them, eliciting surprised yelps from the bewildered ninjas. Strands of Black Whip converged upon the group like a cage of darkness. But as quickly as he appeared, Izuku vanished, leaving nothing but a gaping hole in the cloud of dust above the ninjas. Where'd he go? Izuku was wondering the same thing. He was falling and all he could hear was the sound of air rushing past his ears. His field of vision shifted from the sky to the stadium bleachers to the cityscape below him. After quickly reorienting himself, he realized that he was the target of a dozen projectiles, some green, some metallic gray, coming from a dozen directions, and he had nowhere to hide. Air Force. Aiming down, he flicked his finger, decelerating his fall and avoiding the projectiles, which collided together with a sharp clang below him. Then his surroundings slowed down as he activated Zenith Focus and observed his situation. There was a girl on top of the building to his right, but there were probably more of them hidden. He shot a long thread of Black Whip to the rightward building and hauled himself toward the girl. When he landed on the rooftop, a storm of miniature green blades that he realized were leaves flew at him, and long vines tore through the rooftop and grasped at his wrists and ankles. He easily dodged the vines and leaves and closed the distance between him and the girl. Panic flooded her expression, but she immediately vanished and was replaced by a tall boy who slammed a metal bar down at Izuku. Izuku stepped sideways to dodge the bar and jumped to avoid another vine. The girl had teleported to the other side of the rooftop. The tall boy tossed away his metal bar, grabbed onto a vine, and yanked it free. At his touch, the vine transformed into metal, forming a shiny, pointed weapon. The boy blinked out of existence and Izuku spun around to block his attack from behind. With a few quick jabs and kicks, Izuku knocked the javelin-like metal vine out of the tall boy's grasp, snatched it away, and moved it toward him. Again, the tall boy vanished and materialized some distance away. Clearly, the candidate with the teleportation quirk was hiding somewhere conducting the fight. But this team's goal wasn't just to pass. If so, they wouldn't be wasting their time attacking Izuku only. He thought with a smile. With heightened speed, Izuku darted toward the plant-controlling girl. The girl teleported behind him, hands extended as blade-like leaves rained down on him. He rolled out of the way and took a deep breath. Then, dozens of strands of black whip exploded from his body and reached in every possible direction. Got you? Two of the many strands of black whip wrapped around the two candidates. One had teleported to the edge of the rooftop, the other up in the air. Izuku dragged his opponents next to him and delivered a swift punch to them both. An instant later, Izuku's surroundings changed to a building interior and a mountain of rubble crashed down on him. When the boom subsided, Izuku's opponents, unharmed, finally remembered to breathe. The black tendrils that captured them were gone, and the first year was trapped underneath the concrete. "Hey, you almost crushed us too," the girl with the plant quirk complained as she stood and dusted herself off. "Are you okay?" The candidate with the teleportation quirk, a girl with long purple hair, lowered her arms back to her side. "I have like 2 points left," the tall boy replied. "That was close. This first year really is a monster." "A squashed monster now," the plant girl stuck out her tongue. "That's 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐻 for you. 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐻. That explains the teamwork." The teleportation girl jumped at the voice, and before she could completely turn around, she was tied up in the black strands, with her two teammates pinned against her, too. She blinked and saw the UA first year's fist pulled back, ready to strike. "I thought 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐻 had a lot more people per class. Where's everyone else?" Izuku asked casually. The plant girl huffed and struggled against Black Whip to no avail. "As if we'd tell you, you scared off most of them at the border between the forest and the city," the tall boy stated monotonously. The calmer teleportation girl rolled her eyes and tilted her head wearily at the mountain of rubble. "How did you? If I could be crushed that easily, I wouldn't be here as a first year." She sighed. Because of the black tendrils connecting to her, she couldn't teleport without bringing Izuku along, and even if she did, he would simply attack her and take away her points. "You could have eliminated us," the tall boy suddenly blurted. "Why didn't you?" Izuku smiled. "If you're meant to be eliminated, someone else will do the job." The teleportation girl looked confused, but then shook her head in defeat. As expected from UA, Izuku lifted his hand to his wristband, ready to take the last 4 points he needed to pass. But before he even reached the button, he heaved a sigh. Not again. He turned his head to see a bright golden light rapidly approaching. The next second, he was holding his forearms to his face, blocking the incomer, who was hidden under the blinding golden light and blazing heat. He felt himself fly backward and smash through a wall. After the dust subsided, the 𝐻𝐸𝐽𝐻 students opened their eyes and realized the U8 student was gone. They stared at the smoking hole in the wall. Then they realized they were now free. Then they continued to stare at the hole in the wall. "Thank goodness we're not in UA." Outside the cityscape, Izuku stopped himself with a roll and stood up. He was on a dry, flat field where rugged rocks were scattered precariously here and there. The air was dry, and without the shade of the buildings, the early summer's sun baked upon the land. He looked around, catching glimpses of the forest and a different sector with a lake. The city sector was close by, and at its edge was what looked like the entrance to a subway station. He directed his focus back to the arid flatland and faced his new opponent. The blinding golden light around the candidate dimmed, revealing a girl with golden eyes. She wore a dark blue and orange hat displaying her school's logo. "The Yui, wonder child," she smirked. "I've been getting that a lot today. Not many can block that attack. You're interesting. I actually find it interesting that you didn't pass already. I was looking for a worthy fight so I can actually test myself in this exam, but that was a waste of time." She looked at Izuku as if he was some dish that didn't quite satisfy her taste but was what she needed to survive. "So I guess you'll do." With a wave of her hand, a cannonball of light slammed into the ground next to Izuku, creating a giant crater. After sidestepping the attack, he hurled his fist at her, but she shielded herself with the bright golden light, blocking his strengthened punch and singing his glove. She shoved him back and swung her glowing fist, creating another blazing cannonball. It was stronger than her previous attacks, but he still managed to defend against it. Then, she stepped back and held her hands in front of her, the light from her quirk consolidating and bending until it formed the shape of a long sword. Gripping the weapon, she lunged toward Izuku, the blade radiating heat and light, making it hard to look at. He crouched down, letting the sword pass above him and tripping her with a low kick. She stumbled with a yelp, and before she could regain her balance, his fist was flying at her. She pulled her sword closer, but Izuku knew she couldn't attack or parry in time. However, in a burst of golden light, the sword exploded into a forceful heat wave that scorched their surroundings and sent gusts of hot air tearing through the flatland landscape. The Shiketsu girl straightened herself, breathing heavily. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Then Izuku emerged, unharmed, from the dust, erasing her smirk and twisting her expression into a scowl. Your attacks got weaker, Izuku said simply. A trace of uneasiness flickered across her face. 2 strands of black whip whistled past either side of the Shiketsu girl and grabbed onto 2 boulders behind her. As she looked back in confusion, he pulled himself forward and slammed into her with a kick. Her block was noticeably shakier than before. Izuku pondered. Then, the golden glimmer suddenly brightened, and a giant shockwave of her quirk forced him to back away. The girl stood up straight, her strength restored. However, her confident smirk was nowhere to be seen as alarm overwhelmed her. Their surroundings dimmed again. This time, Izuku noticed that it wasn't just the light emitting from his opponent that was changing, the entire rocky landscape had dimmed. He looked up with sudden realization. The sun was blocked by a layer of clouds. He glanced back at her and smiled. From her nervous, almost fearful look, he knew he guessed right. He released a storm of black whip in the sky around them, creating flurrying and intertwining shadows. What's this? You think this will stop me from eliminating you? She tried to sound confident, but her glow was dwindling as black whip blocked out the sunlight that powered her quirk. Sorry to disappoint you, Izuku appeared behind the Shiketsu student, but you won't be eliminating the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 Wonder Child today. Even with less sunlight, her quirk blazed, and her movements, as expected from Shiketsu, were still firm and quick. You're still no match for me, the girl seethed as she spun around to face him. Don't speak too soon. Instead of attacking her, he threw his fist into the ground, right in the center of the crater the girl created earlier with her solar-powered cannonball. Under the force, the rocky ground fractured and shuddered before completely caving in and collapsing. The girl yelled in surprise as the ground beneath her disappeared and both of them fell into darkness. They plummeted through clouds of dust and dirt, with pebbles and loose rocks flying everywhere. Izuku stepped off a large chunk of falling rock and propelled himself toward the girl, grabbed onto her, landed deftly on the ground, and sprung away before rock and concrete tumbled through the hole they fell through and crashed onto the ground, the sound echoing in the darkness. He let her go and studied their surroundings. They were in an underground section of the arena, the subway station that Izuku had briefly noticed earlier. The arched ceilings were lined with pipes and dim fluorescent lights that flickered on and off. Beyond the edge of the platform, tracks stretched into a deeper tunnel. The station was oddly empty, the only sound being the faint hum of electricity and the clatter of loose stones dropping along the pile of debris next to them. The hole they fell through was completely blocked by rocks, dirt, and concrete, with only a few strands of sunlight peeking through from the field above. In other words, it was dark, and the Shiketsu girl's glow, now faint and soft, could barely illuminate their surroundings. She pushed herself off the ground with a groan and faced Izuku with raised fists. She lunged and attacked, but with less reinforcement from her quirk, he easily knocked away her blow and returned a kick. She staggered backward, her face strained. I guess, she huffed, I was wrong about you. Thought you were just some obnoxious 𝐻𝐸𝐽 loner, but there's a reason you made it this far. You're just as much of a loner yourself, he shrugged. Black Whip shot toward her, nearly invisible in the shadows, restraining her before she could react. She struggled for a bit, but eventually stopped and sighed. Yeah, I guess I am a loner, too. She gazed at the darkness in the tunnel. No wonder I made a lot of enemies. He wondered what she meant as he prepared to take her points with his wristband. But then he heard the soft echo of footsteps. A sense of exhaustion threatened to overwhelm Izuku as he imagined another herd of 𝐻𝐸𝐽 hunters hurtling toward him. The ground rumbled, and he knew an attack was coming. He released Black Whip and dodged backward, but something was off. The attack wasn't aimed at him. What? The Shiketsu girl gasped when pillars of glass-like crystals suddenly erupted from the ground and surrounded her, locking together and enclosing her like a cage. Let me out of here! The Sunlight girl shouted, banging on the crystalline prison with punches only slightly strengthened by her quirk. Her golden glow traveled through the crystals, emitting a soft rainbow-colored shine. Izuku turned around to meet the two newcomers stepping out of the shadows. One was a girl with an elegant hero costume that emitted the same iridescent shimmer as the crystals. The other was a boy with purple lightning sparking off his hands. Thank you for bringing her right to us, the crystal girl smiled politely at Izuku. We were tired of her camping out up there. The boy next to her narrowed his eyes at Izuku and then gasped. Wait, isn't that the UA first year? He whispered to the girl, although the sound just echoed loudly in the underground station for Izuku to hear. The girl studied Izuku for a moment, then sighed, let him go, I guess. Izuku blinked in confusion. But it'll be so satisfying to beat him. The lightning guy whined. Focus. He's not the one we have unfinished business with. The girl turned to the Shiketsu student, who was bristling in anger inside the crystal cage. Fine. Shiketsu in the west as UA in the east, right? The boy turned to the cage and raised his lightning-clad hands. Then, the purple currents became more violent, the crackling sound louder as the attack charged up. Wait. The two newcomers turned their heads and looked at Izuku, baffled. What? The boy lifted an eyebrow. Izuku glared at the purple lightning that was growing fiercer by the second. He didn't need danger sense to know that these two were up to no good. She's already trapped. Izuku nodded at the Shiketsu girl. There's no need to use a powerful attack. Just use your wristband. None of your business, UA, the crystal girl snapped. Izuku frowned. The two showed no intention of holding back, and they could seriously hurt the Sunlight girl with her quirk now weakened. I don't care what business you have with her or what she did to you. Izuku's voice was low. This is a hero exam. You're not supposed to. Oh my god. Stop the yapping. The lightning guy snarled, lowering his arms and turning to his teammate. You know what? Let's get rid of this annoying know-it-all first. The girl turned toward Izuku with an irritated expression. Agreed.